Barney Frank sat down for round 2 of chastising Bernie Sanders supporters. Let's listen.
You know, I talked a little bit about enthusiasm with you. You had a very interesting interview with Slate recently. You said you were disappointed with voters who used their vote to express their anger and frustration with the political system. I'm particularly unimpressed, you said, with people who sat out the congressional elections of 2010 and 2014, and then they're angry at Democrats because we haven't been able to produce public policies they like. They're the ones that contributed to the public policy problems, and now they're blaming other people for their own failure to vote. And the fact is that the failure to vote really does cause a series of problems for a democracy. There's no question about it. Why is it that you think so many people are enthusiastically supporting people like Bernie Sanders, people like Donald Trump, and I'm talking about some people that in the past maybe haven't been motivated to go out and vote?
I think it is a lack of information, to be honest.
So the people that come out and are actually motivated to come out and vote, you're telling me those are the ones that lack information?
No, the ones who don't vote are the ones who lack information.
Right. So what do you attribute the fact that Bernie Sanders and Trump on the other side have generated so much interest in people that haven't been the ones that particularly consistent in voting?
Well, first of all, understand that neither one's got a majority, and actually, I'm afraid Trump is collapsing more quickly than I had hoped, because he would have been a great one to run against, although it's a good sign that he's collapsing about America. But Hillary Clinton has many more votes than Sanders. What it is the fact that people have a tendency to blame others for things that are their own fault. That's what you have. And I think it's a lack of information. There are people who are saying they're very enthused about Sanders. Again, far less on the Democratic side than have voted for Hillary Clinton. She's way ahead of him in votes cast. But you have people who, because I think of a lack of information and a misunderstanding of the process, not having voted, people are reluctant to blame themselves. People like to find somebody else to blame. So then I'll say, oh, see, Sanders pointed out, it's that system's fault.
Barney, the system that Bernie Sanders supporters are mad at isn't checks and balances or voting, as he seems to think it is. No, the system that they're mad at is the corruption, the bribery, the money in politics. I love how it goes right over his head. He's like, I don't understand. You're supposed to come out 2 election cycles in a row for the Democrats to win. Why are you not going out and voting for the Democrats? The problem is you, not the system. You got to go out and vote for the Democrats. No, but they're not going out to vote for the Democrats because they see that this Democratic Party is a sellout Democratic Party. And they raise money from Wall Street, and they raise money from corporations, and they raise money from the donor class. And then when they get in power, sometimes they throw a bone to the American people, but mostly they're doing the bidding of their donors. And he blames the victim. He's like, well, the problem is that these people aren't going out and voting. That's the problem. No, the problem is you haven't done your job well enough to make them want to vote for you. And look at some of those quotes. Oh, Bernie supporters, they blame others for things that are their own fault. Oh, that's rich. So how is it the fault of a factory worker when their job gets jacked from them and shipped to Bangladesh or shipped to Mexico? There's the story that we covered recently, and that actually Donald Trump, of all people, talks about on the campaign trail, about how the air conditioning company Carrier, recently they just shut down the factory, and they're like, we're sending our jobs to Mexico. So how is it the fault of those people? How is it the fault of the individuals who got laid off as a result of the Great Recession, the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession? It isn't their fault. It's not like everybody woke up the day that the unemployment rate shot up and they were just more lazy. They're like, I don't feel like working today, therefore I'm out of a job, therefore, it's my own fault. No, because of macroeconomic factors brought about by shitty policy, they lost their job through no fault of their own. They wanted to work. And there he is, blaming the victim. That is a deeply right-wing point he made. Well, blame others for things that are their own fault. Really? So how about the minimum wage workers who are supporting Bernie Sanders who can't afford to feed their fucking kids or pay the rent or keep the lights on? Is that their fault? Is it their fault that they work a full-time job and they don't make enough money for basic necessities to just stay alive and keep a roof over their head? Is that their fault, Barney Frank? Who are you kidding? Join the Republican Party. Join them. What are you waiting for? Make your transition. This is Mr. Oh, I'm so liberal. Look, my name's on the piece of legislation that reformed Wall Street. But when you go into the details about that legislation, you find out it is riddled with loopholes. How are you going to do financial reform after the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession? And as part of that financial reform, you don't even bring back Glass-Steagall, which is probably the most important part to avoid another crash. Of course, Glass-Steagall being the idea that you separate investment banking from commercial banking. So when you put your money in your local bank, that bank can only do safe investments with it, and they can't do casino capitalism bullshit with it. Where, as of today, they can. They take your money and they turn around and they do puts and calls and they make crazy side bets on top of side bets. And then eventually, as any gambler knows, it goes bust. And Barney Frank thinks he fixed that system with Dodd-Frank. But really, you just put fucking window dressing over the fact that the Wall Street bankers are still allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. That's why people support Bernie Sanders. Not because they have less information, as you said. Oh, it's a lack of information. It's because they have more information. The mask is off. They see how this Democratic Party functions. And they see it's an absolute joke. They see they've sold out to the donor class. And it's no longer enough, Barney, to throw a bone every once in a while to the American people. Oh, look, the party came out in favor of gay marriage in like fucking 2010 or some shit. Oh, how bold of you! When over 50% of the American people were already in favor of gay marriage, those Democrats with spine came out and said, oh, I'm for gay marriage. Wow! Shit that people could have been in favor of if they used their brains back in the 1970s. Oh, you're better on social issues. Yippee skippy. But you still sell out to the banks. You still sell out to Wall Street. You still sell out to corporations. Hillary Clinton represents that, and that's the main point, is that in the mind of Barney Frank, there was a time when he was younger, he was probably an idealist, he probably agreed more with Bernie Sanders. But then when you're in that system long enough, when you're in Congress long enough, and you see how everything works, the corruption becomes a duh. The corruption becomes an of course. The corruption becomes an integral part of the system, where you can't even imagine what it would be like without that corruption. So there's Barney Frank, smug out there like, what do you mean? Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, that's as far left as we can go while still being part of this system. And that's just pragmatism. You got to sell out a little bit. You got to play ball. You got to have a little dirt on you for anybody to respect you. And Bernie Sanders says, how about no? How about fuck that? Let's blow up that system. Let's start from scratch. Let's do campaign finance reform. And let's make it so that there is no private money in the system where the politicians inevitably sell out and do the bidding of their donors. There's a political science study which found recently, it was from Princeton, that the American people don't get what they want in legislation ever. The only area where there's a correlation is what the rich want, what the elite want, and the policies we end up getting. So we don't have a democracy anymore. We have an oligarchy. We have a kleptocracy. And Barney Frank says, up. Let's not go crazy here. You can vote for the liberals. You can vote for the Democrats, but they have to be establishment Democrats. They have to be part of the system. This naive, pie-in-the-sky liberalism of Bernie Sanders, sure, maybe it's good in theory, but voters have a lack of information about how the real system works. So you got to go with the pragmatic choice, Hillary, who will sell out and still do a little bit of change here and there. No. It's not a lack of information. They have more information. And when you have more information, you see how fucked the system is, and you go for the person who doesn't want to play within that system. They want to change that system. That's why Bernie supporters are right and Hillary supporters are wrong. So take your pseudo-liberalism for a fucking hike, because we're sick of it.